Welcome to Radio Gaianym, bringing you a Sophianic broadcast featuring visionary teacher John Lash. Today is the 13th of March. This is Ginny Thwaite recording a conversation with John Lash. The title of this conversation is The Correction Effect and Mephisto Rules.
Yes, and to begin, I want to make it clear that correction effect is the term I propose for the Mandela effect in its second phase. So that phenomenon came to be realized by the world at large in its first phase. And the first phase consisted of memory anomalies. The second phase, which began in the beginning of October, no longer plays with anomalies of memory, but it operates in a different manner. Now, the correction effect is behind the original form of the Mandela effect. Why so? Because the Gnostic investigation established the source of the effect and the supernatural agency behind the effect. And I showed that the Mandela effect is both the proof and evidence of Sophia's correction. So now that the second phase is underway, I propose to just call it the correction effect. And we're going to look at the correction effect as it operates in a particular event which happens to be causing considerable controversy,
Huge
furor in the United States, and that is what?
Parkland.
Yes, Parkland. So we're going to park ourselves in Parkland, and we're going to take a tour of that territory. And in doing so, we're going to bring up a subject which came up in the in the
Gaia navigation experiment.
In the Gaia navigation experiment, the name Mephisto was pronounced. And the phenomenon of Mephisto rules was the subject of, I think, three different briefings. So I'll have an occasion to refer back to that as we proceed.
You didn't really look at the Parkland event, but somebody who has followed the MED channel very closely, whose comments we've appreciated very much, prompted you and said, has anybody looked at decoding the Parkland event? And it kept nagging you, didn't it?
It did. At first I disregarded it. I have the message right here, which was in the comments section.
That's just your...
So I got a comment from Jim Foxworthy and also, I believe, from David Russ, and they were concerning the matter of decoding that event, which, let's call it the Parkland Douglas School shooting, okay?
Yep.
We'll call it that.
Yep.
Apparently you have to be careful about what you say about it.
Well, I think this particular event is very special because this is the first time, in my knowledge, of tracking these kind of events, that the authorities have actually removed people on YouTube who are trying to question the mainstream narrative.
Yeah, it appears as if the battle over the narrative and the objections of certain people in the truth core to the event, calling hoax, calling bullshit, calling cover-up, calling psyop, have reached a peak of particular frenzy with this event. And there's been a vicious heavy-handedness on the part of the establishment in suppressing any discussion about this event.
Yeah, it's the first time in my knowledge that the main players in this event, so David Hogg, has actually gone public and said, I've been accused by the far right and conspiracy theorists that I'm a crisis actor. I've never seen that before. So this is now mainstream. You know, they've pushed it into the mainstream. They've pushed the question of what people are being told into the mainstream by people like David Hogg saying, this is what I've been accused of, and of course it's not true.
Yeah, it's rather remarkable the way this is unfolding. You could say that they are outing themselves.
Yeah.
They're obligated now, whoever is orchestrating such events, and we do hold, Ginny and I, and people in our close team, many of you out there, I'm sure, we do hold to the view that these events are hoaxes that are orchestrated. It's all hogwash, right? And so, but this is the first time in which those who are the perpetrators of the event are flagrantly coming out to protest that they are being called on their hoax. So it highlights some things, and so let's take a look at it from a Gnostic point of view, and let's see how it looks when it is decoded in the perspective of the correction effect. I wrote a response in the commentary section to those who raised this question, and this is what I said. Yes, I have to say I have the nagging sense that the names associated with these events may encode some clues in a way consistent with phase 2 of the Mandel effect. So you all follow my logic here. Remember that in phase 2, which is post Las Vegas Route 91 Harvest Festival, the supernatural agency behind the Mandel effect no longer plays on alternative memories. That aspect is phased out, fizzled out, petered out.
Which you said it would.
As I said it would. Rather, the names of persons and places contained in the description of the event point to interactivity. They point especially to the source of the mysterious effect, as it confirms that it knows we are detecting its intervention.
Yeah.
If you can follow that, then you are on to where the Gnostic investigation is taking us, okay? So it's not enough for us, through the Mandela effect, we recognize that there is a supernatural agency intervening in our reality. And in the current stage, that intervention becomes an interactive process. And the cues and clues to interactivity are seen in the names of people, places, and things. In the names, not in alternative memories. So here we go. What are the names? I'm going to run through the list.
Which is rather large.
Which is rather long, so it turns out. First of all, there is also a question about a linking of the events. Could the Florida school shooting be linked to the Las Vegas event, which was a turning point?
Well, if you follow Ul Domagard,
right,
who we've met,
yeah,
lovely guy.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Ul has done so much work to unravel the psychological operations that the authorities are performing on people. You know, he's actually come up with a list of things that you can check off, whether it to confirm whether it's a psyop. And the main thing is there was a drill being performed on that day. Mm-hmm. So, of course, there was a drill being performed at Parkland on the day of the shooting, but Ul has said that they always leave clues behind at each event.
Pointing to the next event.
Pointing to the next event. Now, I know that Ul has said, I don't care what people think about me, I don't care if I'm wrong, but this is just what I see. I've been doing this for 30 years. It's a pattern that I've tracked, and so I don't care if I'm right or wrong. But he has predicted that the Parkland school shooting left clues to show that the next psychological operation performed on humanity will be on or around the 18th of March.
In Dallas.
And it will be in Dallas, Texas.
Right.
And he says it might not be on that day, it might be, within a 4 or 5 day period, but that's his prediction. And I, fair play to him for having the balls to do so.
Indeed, that's worth noticing. Now, I do detect, in my own way, according to the Gnostic method of investigation, I do detect a link, a pointing ahead from the Las Vegas event to the Parkland event. How do you see that? Well, one of the names of the Las Vegas event, one of the names in the cluster or complex was, of course, Paddock. Everyone knows Paddock. And everyone knows that the participants, the spectators at the festival concert were in a paddock, which is an enclosure for animals. They may as well have been in a paddock. They were in an enclosed area. Go look at the word parkland. What is the etymology of parkland? It's Middle English derivation from the Old French parc, from medieval Latin paricus, which is of Germanic origin. And the original Germanic word means a pen or a paddock. Now, do you think that's just a coincidence?
It's not a coinky dinky.
That the word paddock is encoded in the word parkland, thereby linking those two events. The word was originally a legal term designating land held by a royal grant for keeping game animals. This reminds me of the rumor some of you may have heard that the elite amuse themselves in parks where they release children and other, mainly children I think it is,
children,
as game, and they hunt them down. Have you ever heard that rumor?
Well, this is the rumour that was to do with Nicole Kidman's father.
That's right.
Wasn't it? Who got suicided.
Yes.
He fell off a balcony in a hotel because he was the controller, the handler of one particular child that was in that abuse circle, and she whistle blew and she named him.
That's right.
She named him.
And he fell off a balcony.
He fell off a balcony,
Yeah.
He got suicided.
So there's a certain amount of credence in this story about the elite hunting parks where they pursue game, and that is one of the implicit meanings in the derivation of the word park.
And of course that's what Hunger Games is all about.
Hunger Games is about that.
Revelation of the Method.
And The Running Man, a previous film, is about that. So these are your attention. The correction effect brings your attention to these levels of meaning that are embedded in the word parkland. And there's another allusion. These are allusions. Remember that a mythophrenic fugue runs on allusions, associations.
Can I ask something that I think that you need to point out, and I've asked you this before. What is the difference between you making these allusions when you decode the Mandela effect and people using numerology, for example? Oh, well, it happened on such and such a day and they love that number. And what's there's a difference, isn't there, between you in a mythophrenic fugue and somebody making associations that aren't necessarily there?
Sure. The difference is that the correct way to run a mythophrenic fugue is to construct the allusions and tropes from actual concrete evidence. Whereas what someone does when they go into a numerical analysis, which I consider to be deviant and bogus, is that they are actually constructing the meaning of the illusion. They are not making a construction out of the illusions.
So a prime example of that would be Miles Mathis.
Yes.
Miles Mathis does some great research. I'm not convinced that Miles Mathis is a solo person working on his own. He puts so much work out. He's a great artist, but his you know, I would be working for the CIA if Michael Mathis investigated me because my father and my grandfathers both were in the military. And that's ridiculous.
I would be on the payroll of the Rothschilds if he investigated me, simply
Yeah.
by certain associations I've had.
Yeah.
Right? This is the wrong way to run a mythophrenic fugue. You handle the associations very carefully. But the primary rule, let me repeat again, is that you make a composition, you compose it out of the allusions that you gather from concrete sources. I've just stated allusions, themes, suggestions that are taken from a concrete source, the etymological background of the word parkland. I didn't make that up. The problem with numerological interpretations and the like is that people are constructing the allusions.
So they're constructing something out of nothing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they're using the power of imagination, but they are using it
In the wrong
incorrectly.
way.
Okay? Another allusion or theme that is embedded in the etymology of parkland is this. It also refers to in a military sense to the space occupied by artillery and weapons in an encampment. Well, that's an allusion to the Calico War Party. That's an allusion to a military movement. And you will find, if you continue to listen from this point on, that I will talk more and more about what is the Calico War Party. There's another allusion to the Calico War Party in the Parkland event, and that is the emphasis on the number 17. Because there are 17 bands in the Calico War Party. And so what you see is that the supernatural agency is taking the script that is written by the perpetrators and broadcasting through that script to you the truth of interactivity, the truth of what it is doing. It is using deceit in order to reveal the truth. This is the trick.
What was that line in Ex Machina?
Yeah, that line in Ex Machina says, you know, instead of regarding it as deception, why don't you look at it as proof? Proof. So this is a great deception. The Parkland event, the Las Vegas event, these are great deceptions. But as you look into the names that are contained in the description of that deception, you find the third power of her third attention bringing your attention to the truth, to the Calico War Party, 17 bands, to the relation of, say, David Hogg. What is the illusion of David Hogg? Well, Hogwarts. What is Hogwarts? What is Hogwarts? And what is David Hogg doing? Well, David Hogg is hogging the scene, right?
He's hogging the limelight, yeah.
He's hogging the limelight.
Yeah.
And what is he doing? You can say, I'm going to propose, here we go, I'm going to propose a new jargon. Someone who's hogging is pretending. Hog, sow, power of pretending. We know that in the sacred jargon of planetary tantra, Miss Piggy, the diamond sow, represents that part of the mind of Gaia that absolutely dissolves and destroys all pretending.
Release from pretending.
Release from pretending is the theme of the diamond sow. But a sow is not a hog. A hog is someone who dominates you by pretending. So, hogging. When someone is hogging, from now on, you can say they are stealing the scene by an act of pretending or make-believe.
Well, again, this is another, this is why the Parkland event is unique, because these three children, teenagers, they're not children, have turned into megastars overnight.
Have been turned into
megastars.
They supposedly have 1 million followers on their Instagram and everything. And this is a day or two after they have been participants in a horrific massacre in their school, right? David Hogg is the leading one, and there's two others, Emma Gonzalez.
Which is the, to me, she's, there's this, with the third wave feminism and the Harvey Weinstein scandal, Rose
Right.
Rose McGowan.
Right.
Is it Rose McGowan?
Rose McGowan. Shaven head lesbians.
Shaven head, lesbians, feminists, bullshitting. So she's the teenage icon for that
Right.
particular narrative that's hog-washing through the mainstream media.
That's right. That's right. Hogwashing.
And the other girl, the blonde girl,
Yeah.
I mean, she's Lacey Green's doppelganger.
Yes.
Everything about her is Lacey Green, who's Xenosh, by the way.
That's right.
I'm
And
sure-
she's the perfect blonde bimbo.
And
So
I'm-
you throw in a white girl just to
Well,
make it complete, right?
Hang on, is she a white girl or is she a Xenosh? Because that school, the whole of Florida, Broward County is Xenosh.
Right.
That school
40%
allegedly
they say.
is 40% Xenosh.
Right.
So I would imagine that girl, I haven't looked, but I would imagine if I looked,
Right.
I would find Xenosh ancestry for that girl.
Right. So it's all theater. It's a theater of deceit, which operates on Mephisto rules, and I'll get around to what that is in a bit. Yet in this theater of deceit, the names attached to the people, places, and things actually cue you to the truth, and they cue you to your own power, and they cue you to what you need to know in order to break through that deceit and overcome the people who are orchestrating it. This is how it works. So let's look at the term Marjorie. It's the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Now, if that is not a strange construction, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Okay, let's look at the first word. The word Marjorie is an odd word because, in fact, it represents an anomalous formation of the root major in Spanish, major, the root major, which means big. And the word major, is related to the root mag, which is in the word magic, and in the word magnification. So the word magic and magnification is subliminally hinted in the word Marjorie. Now, the strange thing about the word Marjorie is if you go and look at the development of it, it actually represents the word major, meaning something that is big, but the O-R-Y added means even bigger than big. It's like you can say smart and smarter. The ER of smarter indicates a larger degree of smart. So the ORY of major indicates a larger degree of major. So what is this talking about? Well, it's quite simply cueing you to be mindful of the fundamental principle of Gaian tantric magic, which is the magnification of effect through the boost of the earth. So Marjorie means the magnification. At the same time, Marjorie also refers to an herb, marjoram, a spice, right? Yeah, an herb that is only used to spice things up. So I would say what she's saying is, I'm spicing things up now. I'm really spicing things up. If you think there are a lot of clues loaded in this event, wait until the next one that I reveal to you.
Okay, marjoram is not a spice; it's a herb.
Okay.
So it gives a depth. It gives a depth and flavour
Right.
and richness to the alchemy of cooking.
That's right. So beautifully said. So magic is also alchemy, and we can
Yes.
say that the alchemy of correction is getting tasty and flavorful. It's starting to get some depth. It's been cooking for a while. Now, the idea of cooking and cooking with a cauldron, by the way, cooking herbs, cooking in a pot, a casserole, or a cauldron, also comes up in an odd way. When I was investigating this event to see how it could be decoded, the phrase kept coming to my mind, well, John, with the Charlotte working, you gave command to the planetary animal mother to perform what magic that she can against the perpetrators. And she is stirring the cauldron. Why, you're thinking, well, what are we waiting for? What's going to happen? What do you expect to happen? She's stirring the cauldron of her magic.
Ceridwen.
Okay, like Ceridwen. But there's another name for the witch who stirs the cauldron. And I'll get to that in a moment because that's also coded in the names associated with this event.
So before we leave Marjorie,
Yeah?
I'm going to go back to Miles Mathis because he has done a PDF. If you go to milesmathis.com and put in Florida, Parkland, he's done quite an interesting research. And this character, Marjorie, when you look at what he's uncovered about her, it's really interesting. Her name is the school is named after her,
Right.
because she was allegedly this, eco conservationist.
Right, a conservationist.
And it's not actually the case. It's the exact opposite.
It's the exact opposite, that's right.
The exact opposite. So
I'll touch on that in a minute. So now let's look at Stone Man. Well, stone, didn't stone come up here and there in the Mandela effect decoding? The stone is the organic light. Berenstain, bears. So Stone Man means the man of the stone, or it means the mind of the stone, because mandala, both those words carry the root man, which is a Sanskrit root meaning to think, the thinking power or the intellect. So the thinking power of the stone is the intelligence of the organic light, which is the intelligence of the earth itself. So you have Stone Man. Also you could say, who is the man of the stone? Well, that is the one who reveals the organic light and who describes how the intelligence of the earth is working. So you all who are getting onto this process are Stone Man in some way. It's pointing to you. What about Douglas? You're going to love this. Remember I told you I had a nickname? I said, call me by my nickname. I got quite a few. During the performance of the Charlotte Work King. Teska is short for Tezcatlipoca. So I said, call me Teska, just for fun. We do this in planetary tantra. And who is Teska? What is his official title? Lord of the Smoking Mirror. And what is the smoking mirror? It's a mirror of obsidian glass. Dark glass. What does the word Douglas mean? It means dark glass. Period. So, the correction effect is showing you that the smoking mirror of Tezcatlipoca is encoded in this event. That is to say, it is pointing to the interactive magic that we bring to correction. Points to our role and those who are playing that role. So in a way, it points quite directly to me. But that ain't the only thing that points to me. I was floored when I looked at a few clips of audio of these ridiculous theatrical debates that they were having about this event. And one of those debates was this called CNN Town Hall event, right? So you have two people on the stage, one of which is Sheriff Scott Israel. We'll get to him.
Boo!
Boo! And against him, his adversary is a representative of the NRA.
Yeah.
And I saw the clips, and I saw Scott Israel, and then I saw, her name.
Brunette Babe.
Yeah, that's right. And her name, I saw it written, is Dana, Loesch. I thought, okay.
Loesch.
Yeah, Loesch, Dana Loesch. It ain't Dana Loesch, is it? So I listened to the clip, and I was floored.
So then you listened to more clips.
I thought, maybe this is a
and
mistake.
And the same thing kept happening.
Yeah, and it turns out that they pronounce her name Lash.
How do they get Lash from Loesch?
How did they get Lash from Loesch? I don't know.
Loesch.
SH. I asked myself the same question. Anyway, here's the name. Over and over again, representing the warrior, representing the NRA.
Representing the Second Amendment.
Yeah, the right to exercise your Second Amendment powers.
We're making a joke because of a Murdoch video. We'll put a link in the description below.
Brilliant.
Of the Murdoch film because
we love those kids. They're
excellent.
They're Generation Zyklon. They're going to be the preeminent Calico warriors on the planet. So Doug Glass refers to the dark glass or smoking mirror of Tesca, who performed the Charlotte working. And if that isn't enough to give you my literal name, and also notice that Doug Glass is very close to Doug Lash. And as a matter of fact, one of my relatives in Maine was called Doug Lash, and I've often talked about.
You talked about him throughout the
GNE because they built sloops in Friendship, Maine.
Friendship sloops.
The Friendship sloops, and I used to play and work at the boatyard of Doug Lash. So you've got it three ways. What are the odds of that? What are the odds of that reference?
Huge.
They are just enormously low, okay? But I was asking myself, how can they call her Lash when it's really Lurch? And I thought, Lurch, Losh, I keep looking at this L-O-E, what does this L-O-E mean? So I'm asking myself, is there something encoded in the L-O-E? If you go to Scandinavian mythology of the Finnish epic of the Kalevala, you'll find that the sacred cauldron called the Sampo was guarded by an underworld witch, and her name is Louhi. So the L-O-E is the first syllable of the name of this witch. So there's a deep allusion there to the underworld, and it's the same name, or it's an equivalent name of Ceridwen. There are very many names of the witch in the underworld.
And you have had recent beautiful interactions with a couple of Nordic people.
That's right.
A couple
That's
who are
right.
from the Nordic land.
From the Nordic land.
And he particularly is very into the Kavala.
People who are deeply versed in the Kalevala. The Finnish creation story, and also Not in His Image has been entirely translated into Swedish and has been read in Swedish in an audiobook
by a beautiful Nordic woman.
By a beautiful
with the
Nordic
most
woman.
haunting voice.
With the most haunting voice. So it's not just incidental. There are, I can think of 6 or 8 underworld goddesses who are said to guard caverns or treasures or cauldrons, but it's no incidental allusion that the word Louhi is coded in the word Losh, which is actually pronounced Lash. I mean, give me a break. So, next we come to, of course, our favorite actor, Scott Israel. What a hero.
Boo.
What a hero. And you know, I heard the rumor, maybe you heard this too, that after this conference, this CNN, it's more like a show trial. It's like a Stalinist show trial. After this debate between Sheriff Israel and Dana Lash, in which she was booed as the evil person who advocates people be armed, that the NRA gained 500,000 new members.
But doesn't this happen every time there's a psychological operation in America? You know, I'm British, obviously, from my accent, you'll know that. In Britain, our gun rights got taken away from us after the psychological operation, false flag, actually, of Dunblane. There are no school shootings in Britain because America is still armed. That's why all the school shootings keep happening in America, because
right.
You know it's the anti-gun lobby and the Xenos trying to take your guns off you.
And every time they push the gun control agenda, it backfires in
People
their
go
face.
out and buy more guns.
That's what happened this time, apparently. So there is Scott Israel,
Boo.
who is what? The sheriff. And also, I want you to notice, Rick Scott is the governor of Florida. One of the alleged victims was Scott Bagel. I think that's really a joke. That really has to show you a sense of humor on the part of the goddess. Scott Bagel. And so this Scott keeps coming up, this word Scott. Well, what does Scott mean? Well, first of all, the word Douglas is a Scottish word, and the interpretation of Douglas as dark glass comes from the Scottish language. Glass and dug or du means dark.
Duke.
Yeah, Duke means dark in Scottish, okay? But Scott actually means a payment or fine or consequence, hence the term scot-free. They got away scot-free. So, why does this theme of Scott keep coming up in these names? Well, I interpret it this way. When I see the Florida Parkland event, I see it as theater, I see it as deceit, but I also see a script, a message, or a moral contained in the deceit. What really strikes me about this event, which is stunningly obvious, heed the obvious,
Heed the obvious.
is that no one did anything to stop the shooter.
Well, they stood down.
They stood down.
actively stood down. He told his officers.
Yeah, to stand down, and they hid behind their cars. So there were 4 deputies and the sheriff himself. Did they run in to the schoolrooms and confront the shooter? No, they stood down. They did not do anything. They did not defend the people who were being shot at, and they did not take on the shooter and take down the shooter. So, yes?
Isn't there also a connection with Scott Israel? Wasn't he sheriff of the other Florida shooting?
Yes, he was sheriff at the time of the Fort Lauderdale airport event, when I was also in the air. So he is connected. That would support Ule's thesis.
Now, are we going to dismantle Scott Israel here and now, or should we save him for later?
We'll save him for a little bit later.
I'm salivating.
Okay. I just want to concentrate on what's the message of Scott? Scott. Well, Scott is consequences. And the message of Scott is that there are no consequences. Which is what I tried to say when I said that there is no justice. There are no consequences. There will be no consequences. Get this through your head. There will be no consequences of the Florida event. There will be no consequences to the officers.
There is no universal...
There's no system of justice operating. So Scott raises the question of justice, which is a theme of Jupiter in the scales, okay? And as I say, heed the obvious. No perps are ever punished in this drama that we see going on.
Only the patsy.
Only the patsy, or if they are thrown under the bus for some reason because they become a liability, like perhaps was the case with Weinstein, possibly, which is another Stone reference. Okay? So, to me, what the correction effect is doing is driving into your attention, driving into your mind, the brutal fact that there are no consequences for these perpetrators in the system in the way that it exists today. There is no justice. And they get away scot-free.
Which is part of the psychological operation, it makes people feel more helpless, more despondent, more black pills.
And another thing it does, which is really, really, in my opinion, one of the more evil, deepest evil effects is it drives people to the belief that something is going to save them. Or someone like Trump or Jesus, because they see that there is, in concrete, palpable terms, in existential terms, there is no Scott, there is no consequences, there is no justice. And so they think, but there has to be, therefore it's going to come from somewhere else. And so they say, Trump is the savior, Jesus is the savior, Putin is the savior, and it goes on and on and on.
And we live in a society that, nobody takes responsibility for anything, so,
That's right.
rather than you picking up arms and doing something about the perpetrators in your own neighbourhood.
Here, even the delegated authorities and officials didn't do anything about the perpetrator. What does that tell you?
Yeah.
Another meaning or message, another message that I see decoded in this Scott theme, and this comes up with the name of Nicholas Cruz, is the message of, it's really subtle, but when you point it out, when you see it, it's really flagrant. It is the message that the message of Christianity is futile and hopeless. What is the primary message of Christianity? I explained it not in his image.
Believe in Christ,
right,
and that will save your soul.
And the other side of that, the other part of that is, resist not evil. Resist not evil. What do you see when you see the 4 deputies who are present at the Parkland event? They followed the rule of Christianity, which is resist not evil.
Even though one of them is not Christian.
That's right. And maybe a Muslim, or is certainly a Muslim sympathizer.
He is a Muslim.
He is a Muslim.
He is a Muslim.
Scott Israel is a Muslim.
Why would he have learnt? He's a Jew who's converted to Islam. Why would he have learnt to speak Arabic, Allah Akbar, and say all that shit that you can find him saying on YouTube, addressing himself to a load of Muslim men that are all on their knees, bowing and sniffing each other's asses? Why would he be able to speak like that if he hadn't converted to Muslim? I thought he was a race traitor, but he's actually a Xenosh who's converted to Islam.
That's right. And the fact that Scott Israel is a Muslim convert proves the case that I've stated, is that Jews are actually Arabs.
Yep.
And Arabs are Jews. There's no different.
Yeah. Jew-rabs.
Yeah, they're called J-rabs. They're the same race. Except that the Jews play like they're not, so they can play the rest of the Arabs against the Goyim. They can play them against each other, and they play
Divide and rule, it's their favourite.
It's
their favourite game.
So, let's look at the name Nicholas Cruz. How does this relate to the message of Christianity? Well, excuse me, his name is Cruz. But what does Nicholas mean? Well, Nicholas, if you interpret the name according to its etymology, means, strangely, the hero of the people. So the question that's embedded in the clue is, well, who is the hero of the people? But there is no hero of the people. The perpetrators get away scot-free, and those who are supposed to be the heroes protecting the people stand down and resist not evil. This is what the Parkland event is teaching. It's a whole teaching. If you use the code terms and decode what is contained in them, you see that there's a teaching. The teaching is that Christianity cannot save us, that resist not evil is an insane formula when you are facing evil. And yet that formula was demonstrated as the script of this event. Now, Dana Lash goes on the stage against Israel and says, it's simple. If there are people who carry arms and they are armed, they will intervene in these situations. I don't know if she said anything about his 4 deputies hiding behind their cars. but she proposed the warrior's option, right? By the way, I want to emphasize that I don't think that any players in this theater of deceit can be considered as good or evil. They're just players on the stage. So, to my mind, Dana Lash is just a player as much as Scott Israel. They're what the Gnostic texts call spectral forms. Yeah. They're just specters. They're not even real human beings. Additional to that, for instance, there's another player that you might think is, when you hear her name, is going to be representing the goddess herself, because her name is Pam.
Pam Bondi.
Pam Bondi. B-O-N-D-I. Who's Pam Bondi? Well, she's the friggin' Attorney General of Florida.
He's a right-wing conservative.
Who's a right-wing conservative. So Pam Bondi comes on the screen. This is all part of the same theater.
Exactly. You're not saying that Pam Bondi is coming in to save Florida because she's a far-right conservative. Obviously, you don't get to be the governor, the district attorney of Florida without being in the Xenos pockets. There's no way.
There's no way.
No way.
Right. So you might tend to think, because of her name and because of her message, which I'm going to tell you in a moment, oh wow, in this whole theater of deceit, there are certain players who represent the goddess or the calicus. No, they're all phony. They're all in a game of pretending. But through the pretending,
forms.
Yeah, they're spectral forms. But through the pretending, certain glimmers of the truth shine out. So, the name Pam Bondi tells you what we need. We need to be bonded to Pam. The real power is in being bonded and united with the planet, the planetary animal mother, Pam. So what is the message of Pam Bondi? Again, it's a message that is connected with the theme of Scott. She's standing up very defiantly and saying, well, they're not going to get away with this. We know that there's something wrong here, and certain officers of the law did not perform their duties at that time. They did not charge the schoolhouse, and we're going to investigate, and we're going to go after them, right? And is all that going to happen?
No.
Absolutely not. They will get away scot-free. So all she is there for is another spectral player, another phantom in a theater of phantoms, in order to develop a story. But the story is getting so thin and so cliched that a larger message is coming through the story, if you can read the clues and cues. Shall we proceed? Wind this up?
Yep.
I say that the downfall and the end of Christianity and the impossibility of Christianity to save our sorry asses is being demonstrated through these events. Nicholas Cruz is obviously not a hero of the people. And the name Cruz itself, you're going to love this, is highly suspicious. What do you get when you look at the derivation of the name Cruz? I'll read from Wikipedia, and we know who writes Wikipedia.
Xenopedia.
We can really trust those Hasbara trolls to give us the intel that we need, right? Quote, oh, you're going to love this. Cruz, the name Cruz. Its origin as a surname particularly flourished after the Alhambra Decree of 1492. Bingo! Queen Isabella of Spain.
Isabel of Castile.
Isabel of Castile and Aragon.
And Aragon.
Yes. After the Alhambra Decree of 1492, dictating the expulsion of Jews from Spain and the increasing activities of the Spanish Inquisition, when new Christian families with crypto-Jewish names.
New Christians means Jews.
Yeah, means Jews who convert to Christianity.
Who pretended to convert to Christianity.
Make-believe Christians,
yeah.
Pretenders. When they converted to the state-enforced religion of Catholicism and subsequently fashioned and adopted surnames with unambiguous religious affiliation. Cruz is the classical name of a Zenosh pretender.
Absolutely, I know.
Yeah. And so the Zenosh are beginning to out themselves. The script is getting so thin that you see through the deceit to who the real players are. What the correction effect is doing in its second phase is it's giving you the cues and clues to see through the deceit and to know what to do about the deceit. So you can truly say that if you are following the correction effect with Gnostic skills, with your Snoopy running, that the Aeon Sophia is actually guiding you through the deceit, through the psychological war. Her intervention has now reached the stage where it is functioning as a guidance system that we can actually log on to together and confirm one to another as we go through the process. So I would have you recall, it gets even better on Nicholas Cruz. If Cruz refers back to a name that was adopted for purposes of deceit and disguise in 1492, then I can refer you back to the vampire cluster and to the exposition that I gave in decoding the Mandela effect. When I said, go to number 60, the blessing of the Eumenides, part 2, when I explained that the trigger event that caused Isabella to declare the Alhambra decree, which had been sitting in her chest, in her official documents for 10 years, sitting in her trunk for 10 years. What was the official event that triggered her to call for the expulsion of the Jews?
Oh, it was the abduction of a little blonde Spanish boy who was crucified.
Right.
In a cave.
And bled.
And bled to death.
That's right.
By
It
Jews.
was a case of JRM, which was proven, which was extensively and meticulously tried and proven by standards of law which would excel even the standards of law, legal practice today.
Absolutely.
That's right. So, Cruz links to the Alhambra decree, links to 1492, links to the incident of JRM, and you might think, well, John, you're going into very remote areas now. That seems like a long way from the Parkland shooting, but then I would say, well, what are the names of some of the people in the Parkland shooting? Some of the 17. Well, one name is, of course, Scott Bagel. We'll just consider that to be a joke, right? You get away scot-free, we just will like hit you with a bagel, or, you know, we'll make you wear a bagel.
With a gefilte fish filling.
That's purely for laughs. But what comes next is not for laughs, because the name of one of the alleged victims was Alex Shakhtar. Maybe you've not heard the word Shakhtar if you're an English-speaking or French-speaking person. But the word Shakhtar is a German and Jewish term which means butcher or slaughterer. And it is the official term of the Zadok rabbi who performs JRM. I rest my case. Oh, no, I don't. Not quite. One final note, and we'll wind up on this note. This word Shakhtar occurs in Schramm, which is the...
Professor Helmut Schramm's book on Jewish ritual murder.
Which is the master volume, I would say. It's not the only one. By the way, we'd like to point out something that came up in the course of our researches. I think I did mention it in the decoding talks. Helmut Schramm himself disappeared during the war.
Nobody knows what happened to him. He just disappeared after 1945.
43. I think he
43,
disappeared in 43.
Right.
if you read the 450-page document of Helmut Schramm, which was extensively and meticulously footnoted and supported by evidence at every point along the way, you find a remarkable number of details that, to me, stick in my memory and can never be forgotten. And I'll give you two of those details right now. The first one is that Schramm's records record that in the papers of Bayelis was accused of murdering the young Russian boy Yushchinsky is the name of Pavel Schneerson. And Pavel Schneerson is a vampire. That is to say, one of the traditional lineage of Zenosh rabbis who performs this ritual. And the title for such person is a Tzaddik Shachter, or a righteous butcher. Okay? Also, the papers, according to Schramm, I believe he says this somewhere in his notes or in the text. You cited this, you brought my attention to this. That the files, the main bulk of files that had been accumulated through centuries on JRM were stored
in Dresden.
Were stored in Dresden. That's right.
Which we believe is why Dresden was heavily firebombed 4 days in concession by the Allies.
That's right.
To remove evidence.
To remove that evidence.
Yeah.
That's right.
There was no reason for them to bomb Dresden. There wasn't a military base there.
It had no military value.
Civilians and refugees, and that was it.
That's right.
4 days, constant bombing. Watch Hellstorm if you haven't already.
That's right. So bear in mind the fact that the perpetrators and the enemies of life like to remove the evidence so that you can't even exercise your Snoopy. If you wanted to go exercise your Snoopy on a crime, there has to be existing evidence so that you can solve the crime. So one of the things that they like to do is to remove the evidence, right? And then they can rewrite history, rewrite the crime to their satisfaction and to their advantage. So the final clue or illusion that I would bring out in this particular conversation, it just came up today as I was preparing to record this. I put in Shachter in the search engine, the name Shachter.
In Google?
Yeah, I put it in Google. And what comes up at the top of the algorithms, because they like to promote themselves and they're beginning to really out themselves, prominently is the name of one Harvard psychologist named Daniel Shachter. And what is Daniel Shachter famous for? Well, he's famous for his writings on the theory of memory and emotion, and especially on what is called the theory of constructive memory. This is from Daniel Shachter and colleagues, Zenosh colleagues, at Harvard University.
Harvard's so Zenosh, isn't it?
And here is, in one sentence, in 2 sentences, in 1 paragraph, a summary of Daniel Schachter's theory of constructive memory. Quote, "The first notion to get rid of is that memory is primarily or literally reduplicative or reproductive. In a world of constantly changing environment, literal recall is extraordinarily unimportant. Memory appears to be an affair of construction rather than reproduction." End quote. Now, how do you like them potatoes?
I don't like them. I think it's complete misdirection and toxic.
Do you realize the magnitude of what this man is saying in 2 sentences?
Don't
trust your memory. It doesn't matter about the facts or what actually happened. It doesn't matter remembering what actually happened according to the evidence and the facts. That is extraordinarily unimportant. Those are his words. What matters is that you can construct a memory. Does that ring a bell? I was saying to Ginny as we were getting ready to record, I just came up with this quotation 2 hours ago, and it reminded me of something that some of you may have seen on the internet in a long documentary called The Last Days of the Big Lie. The Last Days of the Big Lie concerns 5 cases of Jewish survivors of the Holocaust that
who are all related.
Yeah, who are all related, more or less, who were featured out of 50,000 cases that...
What, for the show, that were filmed for the Shoah Foundation?
Yeah, for the Shoah Foundation, founded by Steven Spielberg, chose these 5 select witnesses because of the dramatic power of their memories, put an underline under that word, their memories of the Holocaust. And one of these characters became famous in the United States from being on the Oprah Winfrey Show. I think he was on the Oprah Winfrey Show twice.
Yeah, because he re-proposed to his wife on
national television.
Second appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show, I think, he re-proposed to his wife on national television.
So the story of this Jewish gentleman, which is recorded in the Shoah Foundation, goes like this. He was at a certain camp, and he was surrounded from the outer world, or he was barred from the outer world by a barbed wire fence. But there used to be a little girl, Jewish girl, who came to the other side of the fence.
Why wasn't she in the prison?
In the snow, good question. In the snow, and she would throw him apples to eat over the fence. And he was a young boy of 6 or 7 at the time this happened. This is an actual account of the Shoah Foundation history of the Holocaust. And then when he grew up, later on, he survived the Holocaust, he came to the United States, and at a party in New York City...
New Jerusalem.
Yeah, in the New Jerusalem, he met her. He met that girl who threw apples to him over the barbed wire fence of the death camp.
Sided with Roski.
And they had a romance, they fell in love, and they got married, and it was a national sensation. There was a book about it. It was all over the tabloid newspapers. Some time later, as you'll see if you watch The Last Days of the Big Lie, it became known to his family at first, and his son, who was really outraged, and then to the world at large, that he just completely made up that story. And so
he made up his memory. Like
he made up his memory.
Daniel Schachter said, he made up
just
his
like
memory.
Daniel Schachter said. So he is confronted by a reporter who's sitting in front of him and saying, well, now it's proven by the fact that the girl was not living anywhere near that camp, and other things prove that this couldn't have happened. But now that it's proven that you made this up, how do you feel about telling the whole world this story when you knew it wasn't true? And he says, I quote, but in my mind it was true. In my imagination it was true.
And then the reporter asked him, so would you do it again? He said, yeah.
Yeah, he would.
Yeah, I would.
So this man, this witness of the Holocaust, is a living example of the theory of Schachter, butcher, which butchers memory, butchers reason, butchers the true memory of the past, and replaces it with a tale created by Who knows who.
So while we're on this subject, Nicholas Cruz.
Yes.
Okay, so as I said, I've said in another recording that I use my Matangi eye when I'm looking at these psychological operations reported by the mainstream media. I learned a very hard lesson New Year's Eve a few years ago when Muslims attacked German women throughout cities in Germany on New Year's Eve. It was bullshit, but it really affected me at the time. I was really, it really affected me, that story. And then after about 5 or 6 days...
By the way, let me interject. That does not mean that there were no attacks or rapes of German women by Muslims on New Year's Eve.
But it certainly wasn't how the mainstream media
reported it. It wasn't how the story the story was a construction of memory, not a true memory of events.
Yeah.
Right.
So I learned that lesson that night. 5 days after that event, I learned that lesson. Okay, I'm not going to believe anything they say. I'm going to presume it's a psychological operation, trying to poison my worldview until I can prove otherwise. And that's how I operate. When the Parkland event came up, I didn't bother looking at it that much because I had a little look, as I always do, and when I saw an obviously photoshopped photograph of Cruz sat in some courtroom in his Guantanamo Bay orange suit with his lawyer, it was so blatantly photoshopped that I thought, And then I read that he was an anti-Semitic and that he said that Jews ran the world and he hated gay people and he hated black people. I just thought, case closed. And then it turns out he's Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the archetypal patsy that they use for these events. He's a loner. It's said that this kid was autistic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they've got footage of him having a fight at school. Well, you know, who doesn't get into a fight in high school? I certainly had them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is even... Because we haven't really talked about the Mephisto rules.
Right.
And the title of this recording is The Correction Effect and Mephisto Rules.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose I'm elaborating on me using my understanding of what the Mephisto rules are to look at the Parkland event. Jim Foxworthy, again, sent you an email with a link about what the Haaretz, the Jewish newspaper, the online newspaper, were reporting. And it was brilliant. Students at the school in Florida were actually being taught lessons about the Holocaust when they got shot.
This is as good as it gets. I'd like to see them top this. The script writers really have to be working overtime to beat this one.
I mean, it's like the dwarves of the seven dwarves in Auschwitz story, isn't it? I mean, you can't. It's just they are incredibly crap at doing this.
Yes.
If you know what you're looking at.
That's right.
So, would you like to elaborate on Mephisto rules?
Okay, I'll just close with a comment on Mephisto rules. As it turns out, it didn't weave into this particular conversation as it might have. There are several aspects to what are Mephisto rules. The first thing to get is that Mephisto rules is a double entendre. It refers to Mephisto rules, that is to say, the rules of Mephisto. So you have to know what are the rules of Mephisto.
Well, you have to know who Mephisto is first.
Right, and then it refers to the assertion of Mephisto rules, like, you know, the queen rules, the king rules, Mephisto rules. So Mephisto rules is jargon from the Gaian navigation experiment, which describes the way that these theatrical deceits are constructed. One of the rules of Mephisto is this. It was demonstrated at Sandy Hook, and it was in relation to the Sandy Hook talk that I first introduced the term Mephisto. Mephisto is the trickster clown who is the scriptwriter and director of these events. And it is a figure, a mythological figure, that actually uses the Xenos as its instrument. They are, in effect, puppets of Mephisto, but at the same time, Mephisto is their own creation. Mephisto is the psychotic fiction of their mind, which is the trickster, the evil clown trickster.
Which derives from Faust.
From Faust, right, from Mephistopheles. So one of the Mephisto rules demonstrated at Sandy Hook goes like this. You are not allowed to see the evidence that is not there to see.
So where were the bodies?
Right. So that rule was applied heavily here because there was no trace of any photograph of bodies or even of violence. Did they even show smashed windows or bullet holes in the wall?
No, they just planted various students giving testimony, you know, taking you in every which way but the right direction.
That's right.
We saw a man in a helmet with automatic rifle, with full body gear. We saw 3 shooters. You know, there's so many.
The police
different
told
stories.
us not to look. They were throwing blankets over the bodies. So they're so lazy now that they just hand out the cheap script, the crappy script, and they don't even bother to refer to the evidence, the photographic evidence anymore. You know, in Sandy Hook, it was a big deal. Well, show us the photographic evidence. But I don't hear anybody clamoring for the photographic evidence now because the script has gone so far they don't even need to do that. But the rule still applies. You will never see a photograph. No one will ever see a photograph of a victim of this shooting because the rule says you are not allowed to see a picture of evidence that is not there. You see, it's a twisted rule. It plays with your mind. So there are other Mephisto rules too regarding blind spots, that the deceit is a spectator event. And by looking at the deceit like a spectator in a theater, it produces blind spots in your mind so that you can't see reality. That's how Mephisto works. But that's a subject that you might want to research by going in listening to those 3 talks. So we'll kind of conclude on that note.
Okay.
It's been another episode of Radio Gaianym. It's a pleasure to have these conversations, and there's more to come.